morning, friends. We are on chapter 13, Ravensbrook. For 2 more incredible days and 2 more nights we were carried deeper and deeper into the land of our fears. Occasionally one of the loaves of bread was passed from hand to hand, but not even the most elementary provision had been made for sanitation, and the air in the car was such that few could eat. And gradually, more terrible than the crush of bodies and the filth, the single obsession was something to drink. 2 or 3 times when the train stopped, the door was slid open a few inches and a pail of water passed in. But we had become animals, incapable of plan or system. Those near the door got it all. At last, the morning of the 4th day, the train stopped again, and the door was open its full width. Like infants, on hands and knees, we crawled to the opening and lowered ourselves over the side. In front of us was a smiling blue lake. On the far side, among sycamore trees, rose a white church steeple. The stronger prisoners hauled buckets of water from the lake. We drank through cracked and swollen lips. The train was shorter. The cars carrying the men had disappeared. Only a handful of soldiers, some of them looking no older than 15, were there to guard 1,000 women. No more were needed. We could scarcely walk, let alone resist. After a while they got us into straggly columns and marched us off. For a mile the road followed the shore of the lake, then left it to climb a hill. I wondered if Betsy could make it to the top, but the sight of trees and sky seemed to have revived her, and she supported me as much as I her. We passed a number of people on foot and in horse-drawn wagons. The children especially seemed wonderful to me, pink-cheeked and healthy. They returned my stares with wide-eyed interest. I noticed, however, that the adults did not look at us, but turned their heads away as we approached. From the crest of the hill we saw it, like a vast scar in the green German landscape. A city of low grey barracks, surrounded by concrete walls in which guard towers rose at intervals. In the very centre, a square smokestack emitted a thin grey vapour into the blue sky. Ravensbrook. Like a whispered curse, the word passed through the lines. This was the notorious women's extermination camp, whose name we had heard even in Haarlem. That squat concrete building, that smoke disappearing in the bright sunlight. No, I would not look at it. As Betsy and I stumbled down the hill, I felt the Bible bumping between my shoulder blades. God's good news. Was it to this world that he had spoken it? Now we were close enough to see the skull and crossbones posted at intervals on the walls to warn of electrified wiring along the top. The massive iron gates swung in, and we marched between them. Acres of soot-grey barracks stretched ahead of us. Just inside the wall was a row of waist-high water spigots. We charged them, thrusting hands, arms, legs, even heads under the streams of water, washing away the stench of the boxcars. A squad of women guards in dark blue uniforms rushed at us, hauling and shouting, swinging their short, hard crops. At last they drove us back from the faucets and herded us down an avenue between barracks. This camp appeared far grimmer than the one we had left. At least, in marches about Voet, we had caught sight of fields and woods. Here, every vista ended in the same concrete barrier. The camp was set down in a vast man-made valley rising on every side to those towering wire-topped walls. At last we halted. In front of us a vast canvas tent roof, no sides, covered an acre or more of straw-strewn ground. Betsy and I had found a spot in the edge of this area and sank gratefully down. Instantly we were on our feet again. Lice! The straw was literally alive with them. We stood for a while, clutching blankets and pillowcases well away from the infested ground. But at last we spread our blankets over the squirming straw and sat on them. Some of the prisoners had brought scissors from Voet. Everywhere, beneath the huge tent, women were cutting one another's hair. A pair was passed to us. Of course we must do the same. Long hair was folly in such a place. But as I cut Betsy's chestnut waves, I cried. Toward evening there was a commotion at the end of the tent. A line of SS guards was moving across it, driving women out from under the canvas. We scrambled to our feet and snatched up our blankets as they bore down upon us. Perhaps 100 yards beyond the tent, the chase stopped. We stood about, uncertain about what to do. Whether a new group of prisoners had arrived, or what the reason was for driving us from the tent, no one knew. Women began spreading their blankets on the hard cinder ground. Slowly it dawned on Betsy and me that we were to spend the night here where we stood. We laid my blanket on the ground, stretched out side by side, and pulled hers over us. The night is dark, and I am far from home. Betsy's sweet soprano was picked up by voices all around us. Lead thou me on. We were waked up sometime in the middle of the night by a clap of thunder and a deluge of rain. The blankets soaked through, and water gathered in puddles beneath us. In the morning, the field was a vast sodden swamp. Hands, clothes, and faces were black from the cinder mud. We were still wringing water from our blankets when the command came to line up for coffee. It was not coffee, but a thin liquid of approximately the same color, and we were grateful to get it as we shuffled double file past the makeshift field kitchen. There was a slice of black bread for each prisoner, too, then nothing more until we were given a ladle of turnip soup and a small boiled potato late in the afternoon. In between, we were kept standing at rigid attention on the soggy parade ground where we had spent the night. We were near one edge of the huge camp here, close enough to the outer wall to see the triple row of electric wires running along the top. 2 entire days we spent this way, stretching out again the second night right where we stood. It did not rain again, but ground and blankets were still damp. Betsy began to cough. I took Nolly's blue sweater from my pillowcase, wrapped it around her, and gave her a few drops of the vitamin oil. But by morning she had agonizing intestinal cramps. Again and again throughout that second day she had to ask the impatient woman monitor at the head of our row for permission to go to the ditch that served as sanitary facility. It was the third night, as we were getting ready to lie down again under the sky, when the order came to report to the processing center for new arrivals. A 10-minute march brought us to the building. We inched along a corridor into a huge reception room, and there, under the harsh ceiling lights, we saw a dismal sight. As each woman reached a desk where some officers sat, she had to lay her blanket, pillowcase, and whatever else she carried onto a growing pile of things. A few desks further along, she had to strip off every scrap of clothes, throw them into a second pile, and walk naked past the scrutiny of a dozen SS men into the shower room. Coming out of the shower, she wore only a thin prison dress and a pair of shoes, nothing more. But Betsy needed that sweater. She needed the vitamins. Most of all, we needed our Bible. How could we live in this place without it? But how could I ever take it past so many watchful eyes without the overalls covering it? We were almost at the first desk. I fished desperately in my pillowcase, drew out the bottle of vitamins, and closed my fist around them. Reluctantly, we dropped the other things on the heap that was fast becoming a mountain. Dear God, I prayed, you have given us this precious book. You have kept it hidden through checkpoints and inspections. You have used it for so many. I felt Betsy stagger against me and looked at her in alarm. Her face was white, her lips pressed tight together. A guard was passing by. I begged him in German to show us the toilets. Without so much as a glance, he jerked his head in the direction of the shower room. Timidly, Betsy and I stepped out of line and walked to the door of the big, dank-smelling room with its row on row of overhead spigots. It was empty, waiting for the next batch of 50 naked and shivering women to be admitted. Please, I said to the SS man guarding the door, where are the toilets? He did not look at me either. Use the drain holes, he snapped. And as we stepped inside, he slammed the door behind us. We stood alone in the room where a few minutes later we would return, stripped even of the clothes on our backs. Here were the prison things we were to put on, piled just inside the door. From the front and back of each otherwise ordinary dress, a large X had been cut out and replaced with cloth of another color. And then we saw something else, stacked in the far corner, a pile of old wooden benches. They were slimy with mildew, crawling with cockroaches, but to me they seemed the furniture of heaven itself. The sweater, take off the sweater, I hissed, fumbling with the string at my neck. Betsy handed it to me, and in an instant I had wrapped it around the Bible and the vitamin bottle, and stuffed the precious bundle behind the benches. And so it was that when we were herded into that room 10 minutes later, we were not poor, but rich. Rich in this new evidence of the care of Him who was God, even of Ravensbrook. We stood beneath the spigots as long as the flow of icy water lasted, feeling it soften our lice-eaten skin. Then we clustered, dripping wet, around the heap of prison dresses, holding them up, passing them about, looking for approximate fits. I found a loose, long-sleeved dress for Betsy that would cover the blue sweater when she would have a chance to put it on. I squirmed into another dress for myself, then reached behind the benches and shoved the little bundle quickly inside the neck. It made a bulge you would have seen across the groat marked. I flattened it out the best I could, pushed it down, tugging the sweater around my waist, but There was no real concealing it beneath the thin cotton dress. And all the while I had the incredible feeling that it didn't matter, that it was not my business but God's, that all I had to do was walk straight ahead. As we trooped back out through the shower room door, the SS men ran their hands over every prisoner, front, back, and sides. The woman ahead of me was searched 3 times. Behind me, Betsy was searched. No hand touched me. At the exit door to the building was a second ordeal, a line of women guards examining each prisoner again. I slowed down as I reached them, but the Aufseherin in charge shoved me roughly by the shoulder. "Move along, you're holding up the line." And so Betsy and I arrived in Barracks 8 in the small hours of that morning, bringing not only the Bible, but a new knowledge of the power of him whose story it was. There were 3 women already asleep in the bed assigned to us. They made room for us as best they could, but the mattress sloped, and I kept sliding to the floor. At last all 5 of us lay sideways across the bed and managed to get shoulders and elbows arranged. The blanket was a poor, threadbare affair, compared with the ones we had given up, but at least the overcrowding produced its own warmth. Betsy had put on the blue sweater beneath her long-sleeved dress, and wedged now between me and the others, her shivering gradually subsided, and she was asleep. I lay awake a long while, watching a searchlight sweep the rear wall in long, regular arcs, hearing the distant calls of soldiers patrolling the walls.